So basically, Enkidu, Gilgamesh, they drink their wine, they drink their beer, they play together, they hold hands, they run around, they wrestle, they play fight, all of this. So the wrestle is basically the equivalent of pillow fight these days. And then something was going within, yeah, within, because some of the in other beforehand the harmony was broken by an outside force, right? The trapper came in, Shamat came in, uh, but in this instance there was so much harmony, there's not really an enemy, or there's not really an attacker or another kingdom coming to fight them. How did the story move forward?
They go and fight a big thing in the forest.
But what caused that? What caused them to seek such an adventure?
If no one answers the question, no one knows.
Yeah. So it's a good question. Yeah. So there is this adventure that they are going to uh, fight Humbaba. Who is Humbaba? Just to get the whole discussion going. Who is Humbaba? So he is the protector of the cedar forest, and the description is there's quite something. They journey to Humbaba. How did the writer describe that?
They had lots of dreams and stuff.
Yes, they have lots of dreams, but obviously one person had a dream. And is this dream the same all the time? Yes.
No.
It's different every time. Yes. And who has the dream and who comforts the dreamer?
Gilgamesh was the dream.
Yes. Gilgamesh was a dream. Gilgamesh was scared. Right? Every time he wakes up from the dream, Gilgamesh like, I have a terrible dream. Right? And Enkidu always, oh, don't worry, my friend. Yeah? Your dream is a favorable one. And so here is a question that I also asked you yesterday is, what are the words that are always repeated? Yeah. And the word is always, one of the words that's been repeated all the time is called, don't worry, this dream is a favorable one. It's been repeated time and time again. So name me a few words that's been repeated several times in the story, a line. Because there's several of them.
I don't remember any.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I spent some time on this for the reason that this story has a layer of meaning. Layers and layers and layers. And I'm very confident that in the future, this would be a major literature, right? And now this has just been studied recently, right? For the last 5 years, there's just an explosion. And so, myself looking at the development of the story is essentially the people who are into myths are studying it, the people who are into psychology are studying it, and it's just a whole big story because it's so new. It's only been around for 150 years, and it's only been studied really with the great enthusiasm in the last 10 years, right? And I really think a screenplay and a film will be coming soon. And it will be interesting for me, how would they portray Humbaba? How would they draw or portray Gilgamesh and Enkidu? And that leaves it to the imagination, really. Now in the YouTube, you got those cartoons and that they try from comic pictures. That's one, yeah. But obviously, it goes more than that. So what I'd like you to do now is, now we went into the narrative. What we're doing now is just go through the narrative of the story. And we'll continue that tomorrow, except, right? Except that I'm going to ask you, to do the recall in a certain way. I'm going to ask you, what are the literary techniques? The techniques that's been used by the writer. And when I say literary techniques, it's really English language techniques to describe the whole story. And this is one. One of them is the element of repetition. Yeah. What does this repetition do to the listener or to the reader?
It engraves it in your head.
And so now, tomorrow I'm going to ask you a repetition of words or scenery. Yeah. And just to say that, that's one. And the second thing is, what are the similes been used? Yeah. What are the metaphors that has been used? Fourth, what are the analogies that's been used? Yeah, this is literary techniques. Fifth, what are the alliterations used? Are there any questions? Because now we're coming up, and I really want you, to those who have not listened, is to listen to the story, yeah, because it's still worthwhile. Because the story will grow in you, just like the story grew in mine, and so this story will grow in our civilization, yeah, in the modern world. Because although it's been written many years ago, it's really a story for the future. When this was written, it's been copied several times around the Middle East. It's been copied. The Egyptians know about it, and then all of the people of the Middle East know about it, from Anatolia, from Afghanistan, all of this from to Iran. And these tablets were buried underneath the desert of the Middle East, only to be discovered 150 years ago. And after we look at the literary techniques tomorrow, in the last 15 minutes, I'm going to go back to the historical aspect of the story. Yes? Because when George Fox look at the flood section of the story, which we haven't gotten into, there's the flood section, he didn't realize that it was part of the Gilgamesh story. And so he has to travel to Iraq, and when he has completed the pieces to the flood story, he asked the British Museum to fund him, to allow him to stay in modern Iraq, to do more digging, to do more archaeological work. And so it was in this instance, out of his enthusiasm for the flood story and for the Gilgamesh story, out of this, he contracted a disease. Out of pursuit of the story, right? Just because of the story, he died. Think about that. So a man from Britain, who used to work in London as an engraver, and then worked for the British Museum, and then worked for the Telegraph, the newspaper, who's still delivering news today. Yes, work hard for a story. For a story. So in a way, the story owns this fellow, and often not we forget the people who brought this story back to modern society. But George was one of these people, right? And I say now that I say it in front of you. I say thank you to George Fox. No, not George Fox. George Fox is from the Quaker movement. I'm so confused with these names. George Fox is from the Quaker world. Yeah, he kind of started the whole Quaker movement. It's George Smith. Okay, right. There's so many Georges. Yeah, that sometimes I get confused. So, um, tomorrow we do the next half of the story. Yes, but while doing that, the questions would be in relation to literary techniques. Like what's an example of alliteration in the story? What an example of analogy? What's an example of simile, metaphor, personification, assonance? The other thing is flashback. I'm just remembering these things.